Beneath the grand halls of Europe's palaces, where chandeliers once blazed and velvet curtains fell heavy against marble walls, secrets were woven into the very stones themselves. The kings and queens who smiled from gilded thrones, the princes and dukes who rode in triumph through cheering crowds, all carried with them shadows no torch dared illuminate. The hidden crown, they called it, not because it was lost, but because it was never meant to be found. A throne unspoken of in public, a power hidden in plain sight, and a story no historian has ever dared write in full. But here, dear listener, you will hear it. You will walk past the tapestries, through the iron doors, into chambers where whispers carried more weight than swords. You will hear of royal bloodlines bent and broken, of deals sealed not with ink but with silence, of crowns forged not of gold but of fear. And once you've heard it, you may never look at Europe's royal history the same again. Before we begin, let me invite you to subscribe to History One, your channel for uncovering the truths that history books leave between the lines. Each story takes you deeper, each secret pulls you closer. Stay with us, for what comes next is not for the faint-hearted. And now, let us begin The Hidden Crown, the story of the hidden throne and the secrets no one dares to tell. The story starts not with a coronation, but with a disappearance. In the winter of 1499, deep in the heart of the Burgundian court, a child vanished. Not a servant's child, nor a peasant's brat easily forgotten, but a child with blood more valuable than gold, the grandson of Charles the Bold, Duke of Burgundy. His name was whispered as Philippe, though some records blotted out with ink, as though to erase him entirely. The official story claimed illness, a sudden fever, the kind that stole breath from lips before morning bells. He was buried, they said, before the frost melted, but those who served the court told another tale. A pale-faced boy spirited away through the hidden tunnels beneath the ducal palace, carried not by healers, but by soldiers sworn to silence. Some swore he had been sent across the sea, others that he was locked away in a monastery where no sunlight reached, and a few dared whisper he was not dead, but alive, kept hidden because his existence threatened not only Burgundy, but the crowns of Europe themselves. Why? Because Philippe carried a claim, a dangerous, inconvenient claim, one that, if spoken aloud, could topple kings. He was said to be the product of a secret union between Burgundy and the House of York, the fallen royal family of England. If true, Philippe was not just a boy. He was a bridge between two fractured thrones, a pawn who might one day become a king no one had planned for. And so, he vanished. Yet the story does not end with the boy, for in the decades that followed, strange figures appeared across Europe. Men claiming royal blood, pretenders who spoke with the confidence of those who knew hidden truths. Was one of them Philippe grown? Or were they puppets, trained and unleashed by those who wanted to see Europe's crowns shift in their favor? The courts of France, Spain, and the Holy Roman Empire all trembled at these whispers, and behind them, in the shadows of abbeys and fortresses, the true power, the hidden crown, was guarded. Not a physical crown, but a secret lineage, a story passed from tongue to tongue, hand to hand, sealed with blood oaths that could never reach parchment. The story of Philippe was just one thread, but to pull it was to unravel a tapestry centuries in the making. The same tapestry that hid the illegitimate children of kings who grew up to be generals, cardinals, or worse, silent heirs who never wore their fathers' names. Some say the true rulers of Europe were never those who sat on the throne, but those who controlled the secrets that could unseat them. A bastard's birth hidden here, a royal affair erased there, a boy locked away in a monastery, waiting, always waiting. And so we begin our descent, not into the official histories of royal Europe, but into the chambers no torch lit, into the documents signed with false names, into the silence guarded by daggers. The hidden crown was not one crown. It was many, and its story is the story of those who ruled from the shadows. By the time the boy's disappearance had slipped into legend, Europe was shifting like a chessboard under the fingers of unseen hands. The year was 1503, and alliances were made and broken with the same speed that goblets of wine were poured in royal banquets. But amid the grandeur, whispers of the vanished heir still lingered, passed in coded words between envoys, buried in the letters of diplomats, and feared most of all by kings who had something to lose. The French court was the first to feel the tremor. King Louis XII, a calculating ruler with ambitions to strengthen France's grip in Italy, received word from one of his spies. A youth in Flanders was gathering followers. He called himself Le Prince Caché, the hidden prince, and though he offered no proof of his royal blood, he had the bearing of someone who carried more than a beggar's tale. His supporters, mostly merchants and disgruntled knights, claimed he was Philippe of Burgundy, the boy who had died, or rather been declared dead, 4 winters past. Louis XII laughed when he first heard it. Another pretender, he scoffed, waving his jeweled hand dismissively. After all, Europe had seen its fair share of false heirs. But then the letters arrived, not from peasants or dreamers, but from nobles, men of rank, men who stood to gain if a new power rose in Burgundy. They spoke of the boy's striking resemblance to Charles the Bold, of his command of languages no commoner's child could know, of the strange seal he carried, one that matched the lost crest of a Burgundian line erased from record. The French king stopped laughing. Meanwhile, across the Channel, Henry VII of England also watched with unease. His own throne, newly carved out of the Wars of the Roses, was anything but secure. He had already faced one dangerous pretender, Perkin Warbeck, a man who claimed to be Richard, Duke of York, the lost son of Edward IV. Though Warbeck was exposed and executed, his rebellion proved one truth. The English people longed for a royal bloodline untainted by the stain of civil war. What if this Philippe carried both Burgundian and Yorkist blood? What if the nobles who had once fought for the White Rose of York turned their eyes to him? Henry ordered his spymaster John Morton to investigate. What Morton uncovered was chilling. The boy's supporters whispered not only of Burgundy and York, but of something older, of a pact made in secret by Charles the Bold himself, a pact with the Habsburgs, a pact that suggested Burgundy had hidden away a bloodline capable of uniting territories stretching from the Low Countries to Spain. Morton burned the report after presenting it to Henry, who muttered only one sentence: "If such a crown exists, it must never be found." And so began the hunt. Not for the boy himself, for he had once again slipped from sight as though swallowed by shadows, but for the truth behind the whispers. Envoys scoured monasteries, agents bribed abbots, guardsmen searched merchant ships, yet every trail ended the same: silence or a dagger in the back of the one who dared ask too many questions. But the silence spoke louder than words. Something was being hidden. And then, in 1512, in the small city of Bruges, a discovery was made: a chest, heavy with dust, locked with 3 bolts. Within it lay parchments sealed with wax long since cracked. They bore no king's signature, no official decree, but the names written upon them were enough to shake Europe's foundations. Maximilian of Habsburg, Edward IV of England, Charles the Bold of Burgundy. The parchments told of meetings never recorded, marriages never blessed by the church, children never named in public. They told of a plan, not to seize a throne, but to create a throne hidden behind thrones, where the true power would lie, not with one kingdom, but with a bloodline stretching across them all. The hidden crown. Who found this chest, and how it was hidden again, remains lost to history. Some say the documents were burned in a desperate attempt to bury the truth forever. Others claim they were stolen, carried east into the Holy Roman Empire, where secret archives guarded them for centuries. But one thing is certain. After 1512, Europe's rulers acted with new urgency. Marriages were arranged faster, alliances struck harder, assassinations ordered with less hesitation, because in the shadows they feared a question no throne could silence: who truly holds the hidden crown? The storm that followed was not a sudden one. It was slow, deliberate, and carefully veiled in diplomacy. But beneath every treaty signed, and every royal wedding announced in the first decades of the 16th century, the shadow of the hidden crown loomed. The monarchs of Europe were no longer merely ruling. They were playing defense against a threat they could not name publicly, for to speak of it aloud was to give it life. Spain, newly bound under Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile, was rising in power. Their grandson, the young Charles of Ghent, destined to become Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, was being groomed for a throne that stretched across Europe and into the New World. Yet even as Spain's power grew, rumors persisted in the courts of Castile. A figure had been seen in the Low Countries, a man resembling the long-dead Burgundy prince. Some whispered that he had sworn vengeance, not for himself, but for a hidden lineage wronged by kings and emperors alike. The Inquisition itself took interest. But curiously, the Church did not denounce these whispers as heresy, as it often did with dangerous ideas. Instead, it silenced them. Priors and abbots who spoke too openly of secret bloodlines were suddenly transferred to distant monasteries. Parish records were altered, and in at least one case, an entire convent in Brabant burned under mysterious circumstances. The Church, it seemed, feared the hidden crown as much as the monarchs did, perhaps even more. By 1520, Charles of Ghent had risen to become not just King of Spain, but also Holy Roman Emperor. His coronation in Aachen was meant to be the triumph of dynastic politics, a visible reminder that marriage alliances and calculated treaties, not whispers of hidden heirs, determined the fate of Europe. But as the golden crown was placed upon his head, a rumor spread through the crowd. Another crown waits. No one dared say it aloud in the emperor's presence, but it traveled like fire through the markets and taverns. The hidden crown still lingered, waiting for the right bearer. And here, the story darkens further. For in the archives of the Vatican, locked away in a vault no common eye was meant to see, there existed a scroll describing a secret council held decades earlier. The council, convened after Charles the Bold's death, had not been a gathering of kings, but of cardinals and envoys, men who understood the instability of Europe better than monarchs drunk on their own vanity. Their conclusion was shocking. Europe required not one crown, but a hidden one, a line of rulers who would never appear on thrones, never sit in public courts, but whose blood and counsel would quietly steer kingdoms away from collapse. It was this council, the scroll claimed, that had orchestrated Felipe's disappearance. He had not been killed, nor exiled, but kept for the purpose of preserving a lineage that could one day intervene when Europe's thrones failed. If true, it meant the hidden crown was not a pretender's tale at all. It was deliberate. It was real. What no one knew, however, was where that lineage had gone. Some believed it merged into the Habsburgs, explaining their near unbroken dominance for the next 2 centuries. Others argued it remained hidden in convents and monasteries, protected by silent orders sworn to secrecy. And a darker possibility whispered in the courts of Italy, that the hidden crown had become a weapon, a secret society manipulating kings, assassinating rivals, ensuring that Europe's map was drawn not by the rulers we know, but by the shadows we do not. The proof lay scattered. A noble child adopted under false names in Florence, a monk in Antwerp discovered with a dagger engraved with a crown that did not belong to any kingdom, a series of anonymous letters that reached even Martin Luther, warning him not to speak of the bloodline that binds nations. What strikes us, centuries later, is not just the persistence of these fragments, but their pattern. They are not random. They appear whenever a throne wavered, whenever Europe teetered on the edge of chaos. And always, there was the same refrain. The hidden crown endures. And so, by the mid-16th century, Europe found itself in a paradox. Kings ruled with armies and decrees, queens plotted with marriages and whispers. But in the dark, every monarch feared the same invisible rival, not a rival with banners, but with secrets. And it is here, dear listener, that the most dangerous truth emerges. Sometimes the most powerful crown is the one no one dares to wear. By the reign of Elizabeth I of England, the whispers of the hidden crown had become more dangerous than ever. For Elizabeth's throne, though glorious in appearance, rested on foundations riddled with cracks. She was a queen without a husband, childless, and surrounded by enemies who believed her bloodline was illegitimate. Her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, claimed a stronger right to the throne in the eyes of Catholic Europe. France and Spain schemed constantly, waiting for England's golden facade to fracture, and in the shadows, the whispers returned. The hidden crown will rise. Elizabeth, unlike her father Henry VIII, was not quick to dismiss such rumors as mere superstition. Her spies, men like Francis Walsingham, were tasked not only with intercepting Catholic plots, but also with tracing stories of mysterious heirs who seemed to surface in every corner of Europe. One such case, preserved in fragments of Walsingham's letters, spoke of a cloistered young man in the Spanish Netherlands, raised in anonymity, but trained in languages, diplomacy, and arms. He carried with him an amulet, an heirloom bearing a crest no herald recognized, yet one that bore unsettling resemblance to the lost Burgundian rose. Walsingham's note ends abruptly, the ink smeared as though the writer's hand was seized mid-sentence. The next record in the English archives claims the young man died suddenly of a fever. Yet no burial is recorded and no grave exists. It is as if he had been erased, as if someone wished him gone not only from life, but from memory. The pattern repeated itself across Europe. A soldier in France, said to resemble the Yorkist kings, slain in a duel under suspicious circumstances. A nun in Bavaria who whispered on her deathbed that she had been born a princess. A child in Florence spirited away at midnight, never to be seen again. Always the same story. A bloodline hidden, a crown suppressed. But here lies the greater mystery. Who was silencing them? The evidence points not to a single monarch, but to a network, an invisible hand moving beneath the surface of courts and kingdoms. The Spanish Inquisition silenced some, French envoys silenced others, English spies erased the rest. Yet none of them ever claimed credit, and none of them acted openly. It was as though a shadow government existed across Europe, its sole purpose to suppress the truth of the hidden crown. Some historians, daring to speculate centuries later, suggest that the hidden crown had indeed survived, but not as a bloodline alone. They believe it became an institution, a brotherhood of sorts, made up of nobles, clerics, and advisors bound by oath to protect the secret. Its purpose was not to overthrow kings, but to preserve balance, to ensure that no single crown grew too powerful, no dynasty stretched too far. A hidden throne, invisible but eternal, guiding Europe from behind the veil. Consider this. Why did the Habsburgs, despite their sprawling empire, always face crises at the height of their power? Why did England, at its moment of greatest triumph against Spain, plunge into succession fears? Why did France, even as it claimed glory under its kings, collapse repeatedly into turmoil? Each time a crown grew heavy with unchecked ambition, a crisis appeared. And each time, somewhere in the chaos, whispers of the hidden crown returned. By the late 16th century, even the common folk repeated the tale in taverns. Some called the hidden heir a savior, who would unite kingdoms under one just rule. Others called him a demon, cursed to walk forever in the shadows, never claiming what was his. And in some versions, it was not a man at all, but a crown of iron, hidden beneath the vaults of a forgotten abbey, passed from one secret keeper to the next. Elizabeth herself, before her death in 1603, is said to have confided to her closest advisers, "England's crown I leave to James, but there is another crown, one I have never touched, though I have felt its weight all my life." What did she mean? No one knows. The statement was never recorded in official chronicles, only in a private letter that surfaced 2 centuries later. But if true, it suggests even the Virgin Queen herself believed the hidden crown was real. And so, as the Tudor age ended and the Stuart dynasty began, the question endured. If the hidden crown existed, who truly ruled Europe? The kings we know, or the shadows we do not? The Stuart dynasty arrived with fanfare, yet its roots were tangled in suspicion and fear. James VI of Scotland, now James I of England, declared himself the rightful heir to Elizabeth's throne. He was a king of letters and learning, a man who fancied himself wise enough to untangle the web of royal claims. But even James, with his books and scholars, could not ignore the whispers that reached his ears. "Your Majesty," one courtier dared murmur, "the crown upon your head is not the only one that rules this isle." James dismissed him publicly, but in private he demanded answers. He ordered searches through the archives of Westminster, the Tower, and even monastic libraries that had survived his predecessor's reforms. What he found unsettled him: fragmentary accounts of the vanished Burgundian heir, treaties never completed, alliances sealed and broken in secrecy. Again and again, the same phrase appeared in letters, scratched in margins, coded in ciphers, the crown concealed. It became an obsession. James commissioned his agents to scour Europe for mention of it. In France, they unearthed an intercepted letter written by a Habsburg courtier. "The throne is his by right, yet by silence we hold it fast." In Rome, a Jesuit priest spoke under interrogation of a royal line preserved in cloisters, and in Scotland, James's own nobles whispered of a buried relic beneath Rosslyn Chapel, an object said to prove the existence of a rival sovereignty. But no proof was ever found, only fragments, as though the truth had been deliberately scattered like ashes in the wind. Meanwhile, England itself was unraveling. The gunpowder plot of 1605 shook James's court to its core. What is often forgotten is that among the documents seized from the conspirators was a curious note, never made public. It claimed the plotters hoped not merely to destroy Parliament and king, but to replace the monarchy entirely, with the true line, the one long concealed. The note was suppressed, its author never revealed. But if it were genuine, it meant that even those plotting revolution believed in the hidden crown. As the decades passed, the story twisted further. During the English Civil War, when Charles I stood against Parliament, pamphlets circulated claiming he was not the rightful ruler at all, that a secret heir, descended from the old houses of York and Burgundy, still lived. Parliament dismissed these as royalist fabrications. Royalists dismissed them as parliamentarian propaganda, yet the whispers persisted, traveling with soldiers across battlefields, muttered by priests as they were dragged to the gallows. Then came 1649, the king beheaded, the throne abolished, England declared a commonwealth. For the first time in centuries, there was no crown upon the head of a monarch, and in the silence that followed, people asked the forbidden question: had the hidden crown finally been revealed? No, not revealed, but its shadow grew darker. Cromwell ruled as Lord Protector, yet even he could not suppress rumors of secret heirs. Some claimed a boy smuggled out of Burgundy had fathered descendants who now lived quietly in Holland. Others whispered of a line hidden within the Jesuits, guiding events from Rome. And the strangest tale of all spoke of a hidden manuscript, locked in a chest beneath Whitehall, describing the true succession of Europe, not as written by kings, but as ordained by the secret council centuries before. That chest, if it existed, vanished in the fire that consumed Whitehall Palace in 1698. But by then, the hidden crown had become less a story of one heir and more a question of unseen power. Who truly decided the fate of nations? Was it the monarchs who paraded in coronation robes, or the invisible hand that silenced rivals, buried documents, and preserved the secret line? The answer was never spoken aloud. Yet in every court, from London to Madrid, from Vienna to Paris, the same unease lingered. A throne might be toppled, a dynasty destroyed, but the hidden crown always endured. And so the legend deepened as Europe marched toward the modern age. By the dawn of the 18th century, Europe was aflame with succession crises. The War of the Spanish Succession tore the continent apart, pitting Bourbon France against the Habsburgs of Austria, while England, the Dutch Republic, and countless allies scrambled to prevent one dynasty from controlling too much of Europe. To the world, it looked like a struggle of kings, treaties, and armies. But beneath the smoke of cannons, in the corridors where quills signed away nations, the whispers resurfaced with more urgency than ever. The hidden crown chooses its moment. In Vienna, a diplomat wrote of a sealed letter discovered among the papers of the late Emperor Leopold I. It contained a warning: if Spain falls to France, the hidden crown will not remain silent. The letter bore no signature, no seal, yet its handwriting matched none of Leopold's scribes, and its presence among his effects baffled his secretaries. Some claimed it was a forgery, a trick planted by enemies. Others whispered that the emperor himself had corresponded with unseen powers, guardians of the secret line that kings dared not name. Meanwhile, in France, the court of Louis XIV, the Sun King, was drowning in splendor and paranoia. His palace at Versailles glittered with mirrors and fountains, But beneath the gold lay fear. The old rumor had reached even him. A rival heir existed, one whose claim might outshine even the grandeur of the Bourbons. Louis ordered his spy master, Nicolas de la Reynie, to pursue the matter. La Reynie's agents tracked tales across Flanders, Italy, and England. What they found was unsettling. A recurring pattern of children born to noble houses with no clear parentage, yet curiously well-educated, curiously protected, curiously vanished at the first hint of inquiry. La Reynie reported to the king in guarded words, "Sire, there is no single man to fear. What you face is a lineage, one that survives because it never declares itself." Louis is said to have responded, "Then it is not a crown at all. It is a shadow of a crown." And yet, shadows move men more than light. At the same time in England, Queen Anne, childless despite 17 pregnancies, watched her throne tremble. Parliament feared a Catholic restoration if no Protestant heir was secured. The Act of Settlement, 1701, named Sophia of Hanover as the successor, ensuring the Protestant line. Yet in taverns and pamphlets, another story spread. There was no need to scour Germany for a queen. The rightful heir, some said, was already here, descended from the hidden crown, living quietly under an assumed name. Parliament stamped out the rumor swiftly, branding it sedition. But the fact it arose at such a delicate moment was no accident. Someone wanted the story alive, and here lies the most tantalizing thread of all. Across these crises, the whispers always surfaced when crowns teetered, never during peace, never in stability, always in the vacuum of uncertainty. Almost as if the secret keepers themselves released the rumor, a reminder that the hidden lineage still breathed. The 18th century also brought the Enlightenment, a time of reason and skepticism. Philosophers mocked superstition, scientists measured the heavens, and writers questioned divine right itself. Yet even in this new age of reason, the story of the hidden crown refused to die. Voltaire, in a private letter, mocked it as a crown that exists only in the imagination of fearful monarchs. And yet, he admitted to having seen, in the library of a German prince, a genealogy with entire branches erased, replaced only with the words "Calatus," hidden. It was as though the secret lived on not only in whispers, but in deliberate absences, in what was missing from the record, what was torn from family trees, what was buried in fires that consumed archives and palaces alike. And so, as the century drew on, Europe glittered with reason and progress, yet still trembled with shadows. The kings and queens crowned before cheering crowds were not the only sovereigns in the minds of the people. Behind every coronation, every war, every treaty, lurked the same question. If the hidden crown was real, who wore it now? By the mid-18th century, the whispers had become more dangerous than any army, for the crowns of Europe were no longer steady on the heads of kings and queens. Revolutions of thought were brewing, and shadows had learned to move in silence where cannons could not. In Paris, cafes hummed with Enlightenment debates, yet in certain corners, hushed voices spoke of another kind of revolution, not of philosophers or parliaments, but of bloodlines. A manuscript surfaced in 1752, circulating quietly among nobles. Known only as the Testament of the Rose, it claimed to trace a lineage from Philippe of Burgundy through secret marriages and cloistered children. The line, the document said, had not died but lived, hidden among lesser noble families in the Low Countries, always shielded, always prepared. The manuscript vanished as suddenly as it appeared. One copy was seized by the police, another destroyed by fire, and the last rumored to have been purchased by an English gentleman who locked it in a chest never opened again. Yet its brief existence was enough. Rumors spread like wildfire. Perhaps the hidden crown was not merely a tale of the past, but a living claim ready to awaken. Across the Channel, Britain itself faced storms of legitimacy. The Jacobite risings in 1715 and again in 1745 had shaken the kingdom. Charles Edward Stuart, the young pretender, Bonnie Prince Charlie, marched south with Highland armies, claiming the throne as the rightful heir of the Stuarts. But here's the chilling question historians rarely dare ask. Was the Jacobite cause merely Stuart ambition? Or was it quietly encouraged by those who whispered of the hidden crown, hoping to use a Stuart victory as a mask for a greater claim? Letters from French envoys suggest just that. One agent wrote in 1745, "The Stuart prince is but a candle flame. Behind him there is another fire, older and darker. We serve not only the lilies of France, but the crown that waits unseen." When the Jacobite rebellion failed and Charles fled into exile, it was said he carried with him not only dreams of his lost throne, but papers so dangerous they were never shown to his followers. Some believe they contained genealogies linking his cause to the lost Burgundian line. Others say they were instructions from a secret council, proof of the hidden crown's hand in European politics. Charles drank himself into ruin in Rome, but those papers, if they existed, were never found. Meanwhile, the age of revolutions dawned. America broke from Britain in 1776, and in 1789, the streets of Paris ran red with the blood of nobles. The French Revolution tore the crown from Louis XVI, declaring that monarchy itself was a fraud. The guillotine, it seemed, would end forever the myth of divine right and secret heirs. Yet here lies the cruel irony. It was in this chaos that whispers of the hidden crown grew stronger. As heads fell in Paris, pamphlets appeared, claiming that the revolution had not destroyed monarchy, but revealed its weakness, and that the true ruler, the hidden crown, would soon emerge to restore order. Some revolutionaries scoffed, calling it superstition spread by counter-revolutionaries. Others feared it was true, that behind the terror lurked not freedom, but another shadow monarchy. The Comte de Saint-Germain, that mysterious figure who haunted the courts of Europe, was even said to have spoken of it. "Kings fall," he told a Prussian general in 1786. "But the true crown has never been seen. It guides not by armies, but by silence." Remember this when thrones burn. By the end of the century, Napoleon Bonaparte rose from obscurity to crown himself emperor. He mocked the old monarchies, tore down dynasties, and placed his family on thrones across Europe. Yet even Napoleon, with his iron will, could not escape the whispers. In 1804, on the eve of his coronation, an anonymous letter was delivered to him. It read simply, "You may wear the crown of France. But the hidden crown does not permit impostors." The emperor, enraged, ordered an investigation, but no culprit was ever found. He laughed it off in public, yet those close to him claimed he kept the letter hidden in his desk until his final days. And so, as Europe marched into the modern age of revolutions, republics, and empires, the story of the hidden crown endured. No matter how many thrones fell, no matter how many kings were executed or exiled, the shadow of that unseen sovereignty lingered. Because the true terror was not that kings might be overthrown. The true terror was that perhaps kings had never ruled at all. The 19th century was meant to be the age of progress, of reason, of nations forged not by dynasties, but by people. Yet even as factories roared and revolutions swept through the streets, the hidden crown whispered still, now deeper in the shadows, more dangerous than ever. In 1815, after the fall of Napoleon, Europe gathered at the Congress of Vienna. Kings, diplomats, and ministers carved out the new balance of power, determined to prevent another emperor from rising. But amid the pomp of banquets and the strict order of negotiations, there were rumors of a second council, one that met not in gilded halls, but in private chambers lit by a single candle. Some called it the Council of the Veil. Delegates, it was said, arrived under false names, carrying no banners, representing not nations, but an older authority. Their purpose, not to divide Europe among monarchs, but to ensure the hidden crown's influence endured beneath the new order. Was it myth? Or did it explain why Vienna's treaties seemed less like compromises between rival kings and more like an invisible hand carefully arranging pieces on the board? Metternich of Austria, the brilliant statesman, once wrote in his diary, "We pretend to decide, but we are decided." A silence greater than our voices rules here. The entry was later crossed out in thick ink, as though someone, perhaps Metternich himself, had tried to erase it. Through the 19th century, as nationalism rose and monarchies wavered, the hidden crown appeared not in palaces, but in whispers among revolutionaries. In Italy, the Carbonari, a secret society fighting for unification, claimed in their ranks men who spoke of a hidden bloodline that would one day rule a united Europe. In Poland, insurgents against Russian domination were inspired by pamphlets declaring that the hidden king lives and his time will come. Most chilling were the murmurs in France after the Bourbon Restoration. Louis XVIII sat uneasily on the throne once drenched in his brother's blood. Every assassination attempt, every street riot, carried rumors that it was not merely the anger of the people, but the will of the hidden crown. One pamphlet circulated in Paris in 1820 proclaimed, "France may accept Bourbon, Bonapartes, or none at all, but the throne will never be empty. The true crown is never seen, yet never absent." The monarchy tried to suppress it, but the idea sank deeper into the public imagination. Maybe kings were only puppets, and the real sovereign had never shown his face. As the century marched on, more evidence, if we dare call it that, emerged. In 1848, when revolutions exploded across Europe, toppling thrones in France, Austria, and beyond, revolutionaries discovered in the archives of Milan a set of sealed letters. They spoke of an heir of Burgundy still being protected, as late as 1793, by clerics in Switzerland. Though scholars dismissed them as fabrications, the timing was too perfect. Europe was once again convulsing, and once again the whispers of the hidden crown resurfaced. Even Bismarck, the Iron Chancellor of Prussia, seemed haunted by the idea. In a private letter to a confidant, he wrote, "I have learned to distrust what is seen. Monarchs strut upon stages, yet unseen hands draw the curtains. I wonder if we are not all actors in a play written centuries ago. By the century's end, with empires stretching across the globe, it seemed absurd to believe in hidden heirs or secret councils. Britain ruled the seas. The Habsburgs still clung to Vienna. The Romanovs glittered in St. Petersburg. Yet just as the world prepared to enter a new century, the story of the hidden crown would return in blood. Because shadows have a way of stepping into the light when kings least expect it. The 20th century dawned with crowns gleaming brightly, but their foundations were already cracking. The great empires, British, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, Ottoman, stood like towering statues, impressive from afar, yet hollowed within. And in the shadows of these colossal monarchies, the whispers of the hidden crown stirred once more, now with a sharper edge. In 1914, a single gunshot in Sarajevo set the world ablaze. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, was assassinated, and Europe collapsed into the Great War. To the world, it was an act of Serbian nationalism. But in the smoky cafes of Vienna and Berlin, another interpretation spread. Franz Ferdinand had been silenced not by anarchists, but because he had come too close to uncovering something. You see, the Archduke was a reformer. He dreamed of reshaping the empire into a federation, one that would give new voice to Slavs, Hungarians, Czechs, and others long silenced. But in his private writings, now scattered and partially destroyed, there are curious notes. One page, salvaged from his study after his death, read, "They warn me not to ask about the crown beyond Vienna. They fear I will discover its keepers. But why should a Habsburg fear another throne, unless it is one greater than ours?" The note was never meant for the public. It vanished from archives, its copy destroyed. But the rumor lived. Franz Ferdinand had stumbled near the secret of the hidden crown, and was silenced for it. When the Great War ended in 1918, thrones fell like dominoes. The Habsburgs, the Romanovs, the Ottomans, the German Kaiser, all swept away. To Republicans, it was the triumph of democracy. But to those who still whispered of the hidden crown, it was proof of something darker. No throne was permanent, because none were truly sovereign. And then came the most chilling rumor of all. In 1922, a French historian named Henri Delatour claimed to have uncovered documents in the ruins of a Belgian monastery, destroyed during the war. The parchments, he said, spoke of a council of the crown, meeting secretly even into the 19th century. Their task was not to rule openly, but to ensure that Europe's monarchies never escaped their grasp. If a king grew too ambitious, he was toppled. If a dynasty weakened, they guided another into place. According to Delatour, the fall of the Habsburgs had been orchestrated long before Sarajevo. Delatour's work was ridiculed by scholars, dismissed as fantasy. But shortly after publishing his findings, he died suddenly in a hotel room in Lyon. The cause was listed as heart failure. His notes vanished, and yet the whispers would not die. When Adolf Hitler rose in Germany, promising a 1,000-year Reich, some saw in his obsession with bloodlines a twisted echo of the old legend. He scoured archives, seized manuscripts, and even sent expeditions into monasteries and hidden vaults, hunting for proof of an ancient lineage. What did he hope to find? Some believe he sought the hidden crown itself, mistaking the legend for an object of power rather than a shadow of influence. His failure to find it only deepened the myth. If even the Führer, with all his armies and spies, could not uncover it, then perhaps it was more real than anyone dared admit. And then came 1945. Europe lay in ruins, monarchies toppled or neutered, empires dissolved, cities burned. Many declared the age of crowns was over. But in the ashes of war, certain documents surfaced once more, letters hidden in Swiss vaults, written in careful Latin, bearing seals unknown to heraldry. They spoke not of kings or parliaments, but of custodes coronae, keepers of the crown. Their duty, the letters said, was to remain unseen until Europe needed them again. Who were these keepers? Nobles? Clergy? Politicians hiding in plain sight? No one knows. But the timing is haunting. For just as Europe abandoned monarchies, the idea of hidden rulers, of invisible crowns, did not vanish. It shifted, quietly, seamlessly, into the new order of states, alliances, and secret councils. The hidden crown was no longer tied to golden thrones or jeweled diadems. It had become something greater, the unseen sovereignty behind modern power. And so, the legend endured, even in the 20th century, whispered in the halls of collapsing palaces and rising parliaments alike. The crowns we see are fragile. The crown we do not see has never fallen. The ruins of the Second World War gave birth to a new Europe, one not of monarchies and empires, but of republics, federations, and secret councils stitched together to prevent another catastrophe. Yet with every treaty signed, every new alliance declared, the question lingered. Had Europe truly escaped its old shadows? Or had the hidden crown simply changed its mask? In 1957, the Treaty of Rome established the European Economic Community, a step toward uniting the continent. Officially, it was the work of visionaries, men of peace, seeking to bind nations together through trade and cooperation. But unofficially, in the cafes of Brussels and Paris, some whispered that this was not a new dream at all. It was the old dream of the hidden crown resurfacing, a Europe bound under one sovereignty, though cloaked now in bureaucracy instead of monarchy. Stranger still were the private papers of Konrad Adenauer, West Germany's first chancellor. In one entry, dated 1954, he wrote, "We are urged to remember the crown that binds," a phrase not of politics, but of history. They speak as if this is inevitable, not chosen. I wonder if we are remaking Europe or only uncovering what was hidden. Who were they? He never explained. The phrase was struck out in later drafts, yet its presence in his private notes has never been fully explained. At the same time, monarchies that survived the war, Britain, the Netherlands, Belgium, Scandinavia, began to seem strangely symbolic, stripped of real power, yet still central to national identity. Some historians argue this was by design. By reducing kings and queens to ceremonial figures, the real power could operate in silence, free from scrutiny. Others claim the monarchies themselves became willing masks for the hidden crown, their crowns glittering brightly to distract from the unseen sovereignty moving behind governments and markets. And then came the Cold War. East and West, NATO and the Warsaw Pact, democracy and communism. Europe was divided, watched over by superpowers. Yet even in this ideological struggle, the whispers endured. In 1962, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a British intelligence officer filed a curious report. He claimed that in the chaos of negotiations, a back-channel message was sent from an unauthorized European authority, urging restraint. The Americans dismissed it as Soviet trickery. The British officer, however, wrote in the margin, "This bears the hand of the crown concealed." The report was buried in archives, but decades later, when declassified, it reignited the old question. Had some hidden authority tried to steer the world away from nuclear war? By the late 20th century, as the Berlin Wall fell and Europe prepared for another great unification under the European Union, the whispers took on a new form. The hidden crown was no longer spoken of as a lineage, but as a network, no longer a bloodline, but a council, no longer bound by thrones, but by silence and influence. In 1992, with the signing of the Maastricht Treaty, creating the EU as we know it, a curious rumor spread among journalists that the treaty's final wording had not been written by any politician, but delivered in a sealed envelope by a man whose name appeared nowhere on official records. The story was laughed off, dismissed as conspiracy. But the rumor clung, and even in Britain, as Queen Elizabeth II reigned with dignity and tradition, Some whispered that her crown was not the true one, that behind the pomp of royal weddings and jubilees, decisions were shaped by a sovereignty older than her line, a sovereignty that had survived every war, every revolution, every execution block. The 20th century ended with Europe appearing modern, democratic, free. But the whispers had never faded. In fact, they had grown more dangerous. For if once the hidden crown was tied to a child spirited away, or a document hidden in a monastery, now it was something far more elusive. Not one crown, not one heir, but the invisible sovereignty of Europe itself, unseen, unclaimed, yet always present. And so, as the 21st century dawned, the same haunting question lingered. Do we elect our rulers, or do we only watch the crowns we are meant to see, while the true crown remains hidden still? The 21st century, with its gleaming skyscrapers, digital revolutions, and endless talk of progress, was supposed to leave behind the old ghosts of thrones and crowns. Yet if anything, the whispers of the hidden crown only adapted, finding new life in a world obsessed with transparency, yet drowning in secrecy. In 2008, as financial markets across the globe collapsed, Europe once again found itself at a crossroads. Banks fell, governments trembled, and ordinary people filled the streets in anger. Yet even in the chaos, certain nations, certain institutions, emerged strangely unscathed. A leaked memo from a Brussels summit, never confirmed but widely discussed among insiders, mentioned the guardians of stability as if they were known actors shaping the crisis from behind the curtains. Some believed it was a metaphor. Others, recalling the centuries of whispers, saw it differently. The hidden crown, now operating not through palaces or dynasties, but through financial systems and invisible agreements. And then came the Brexit debates in Britain. To most, it was about sovereignty, trade, immigration. But among historians who remembered the old legends, a darker interpretation stirred. What if Britain's departure was less about the will of the people, and more about a fracture within the hidden crown itself? Competing visions of Europe, one united under a single invisible sovereignty, the other fractured and divided, may have clashed not only in Parliament, but also in places unseen, where no vote is ever cast. Even more mysterious were the documents that surfaced in 2017, leaked through obscure digital channels. Among thousands of dull bureaucratic reports, a handful of pages bore a strange seal. A crown without jewels, encircled by the Latin words corona abscondita regnat, the hidden crown reigns. The text itself was mundane, discussing energy strategies and cultural exchanges, but the seal was unlike anything in modern heraldry. Cryptographers debated whether it was an elaborate hoax, but if so, it was a remarkably detailed one, echoing symbols from manuscripts as old as the 14th century. And what of the monarchies that still endure? The Windsors in Britain, the Bourbons in Spain, the monarchs of Scandinavia and the Low Countries? They stand as beloved symbols, embodying history, tradition, and continuity. Yet their very survival in an age of republics raises questions. Are they truly powerless ornaments, or do they serve as masks, bright public crowns distracting from the one crown that has never shown itself? There are those who say the hidden crown today is no longer about individuals at all. Not a lost child smuggled out of a palace centuries ago, not a secret heir lurking in exile. Instead, it has become an idea, an inheritance of power passed through unseen channels, shaping nations without ever being acknowledged, the sovereign without a face, the ruler without a throne. And if that is true, then perhaps the most unsettling thought of all is this: the hidden crown may not only belong to the past, it may be here still, quietly watching, quietly guiding, waiting for the moment when its presence will no longer need to remain hidden. For history has shown us one chilling truth: crowns fall, dynasties die, republics rise and crumble, but sovereignty never disappears. It only changes its mask. So the legend continues, whispered in libraries, in archives, in late-night conversations between scholars and statesmen. The hidden crown has no need to be seen, for it has always ruled in silence, and perhaps it always will.